A family dinner turned into a battlefield overnight. A conversation about real estate, started by the mother-in-law, turned into a real scandal. The husband, unable to contain his emotions, jumped up from his seat and shouted, "When my mother told you to give your second apartment to my sister with 3 children, you should have answered, yes." The next moment, a pot of hot borscht flew across the table. The woman froze, but only for a moment. Good day, dear listeners. I am glad to welcome you to my channel. I present to you a new interesting story. Enjoy listening. Tatiana Sergeyevna Kremneva always knew the value of money. At 25, she was already a leading programmer in a large IT company, receiving a salary that many of her peers could only dream of. She bought her first one-room apartment at 22, right after receiving her diploma. Her parents then twirled their fingers at their temples. Why take out a loan when you can live with them? But Tatiana stubbornly saved, put aside every penny, worked on weekends as a freelancer. Quote, "Freedom is more important than comfort," she told her mother, packing her things into cardboard boxes. After 3 years of hard work and strict savings, she gave up her first apartment and bought a 2-room apartment in a new building. Then she took out a mortgage on a second, 1-room apartment, but in the center, rented it out, and the money went toward early repayment of the loan. By the age of 27, Tatiana was the owner of 2 apartments without encumbrances and a stable income from rent. Her friends were openly envious. Some people are lucky, they work at a computer, click their fingers on the keyboard, and here you have apartments. Tatiana just grinned. They did not see her programming at night, did not know how she ate pasta with ketchup for months on end to save up for the down payment. They did not see how she learned new technologies while they watched TV series or went to clubs. She met Maxim at a corporate party at the General Friends. A tall, handsome civil engineer with kind, curly eyes and a charming smile. He worked in a design bureau, earned well, but, of course, did not reach her income. But he was attentive, caring, knew how to listen. Quote, "You are amazing," he said, hugging her in the kitchen of her 2-room apartment. So young, and already achieved everything herself. Tatiana then thought that she had found her soulmate. Maxim also valued independence, made plans for the future, dreamed of his own house outside the city. They could spend hours discussing interior design, layouts, and real estate investments. The wedding was modest, for about 50 people in a cafe near the house. Tatiana deliberately chose a simple place, did not want to show off. Maxim was delighted with her practicality. Quote, "Why waste money on showing off? We'd better put it aside for the house," he whispered in her ear during the first dance. Zinaida Romanovna, Maxim's mother, smiled tensely at the wedding. A woman of about 50 years old, with gray hair styled in a strict hairstyle, in a dark blue suit made of synthetics. She worked as a controller at a machine building plant for 30 years, retired with minimal benefits, lived in a 2-room Khrushchev-era apartment that she had inherited from her parents. "You have a beautiful bride," she said to her son, her voice sounding somehow cold. Smart, successful, if only her character would not be spoiled by all these achievements. Maxim did not pay attention to the subtext then, and Tatiana caught this look of her mother-in-law, assessing, unfriendly, as if the woman was estimating how much her daughter-in-law's dress, shoes, jewelry could cost. The first months of family life were like from a romantic movie. Maxim moved in with Tatiana in a 2-room apartment. She continued to rent out the second apartment. They put money aside for a future house. In the evenings they cooked together, watched movies, made plans. "In a couple of years we will save enough, buy a plot of land outside the city," Maxim dreamed, looking at house plans on the internet. "I will design it myself, and partially build it myself. Can you imagine what savings it will be?" Tatiana nodded, hugging her husband. She liked his ambitions, practicality. It seemed that they were going in the same direction. Zinaida Romanovna came to visit once a week, usually on Sunday for lunch, always with a cake from the store and critical comments. Quote, "You've become thin, Tatiana. Doesn't Maxim feed you?" She started in the hallway. "Or is it work that's eating you up? Although some kind of work is sitting on the computer. Here we are at the factory, where we really did work 12 hours a day without days off." Tatiana tried to be polite at first. "Thank you for your concern, Zinaida Romanovna. I'm fine. I like my job, the salary is fine. The salary, of course, is good. That's true. Just don't forget that family is not only about money. Family is about caring for each other, support in difficult times." Maxim usually kept silent during such conversations. Tatiana attributed this to her unwillingness to enter into a conflict with her mother. You never know, an elderly person, let him say what he thinks. But Zinaida Romanovna became more and more persistent in her hints. She would complain about her health, saying that her pension is not enough for medicine. Then she would start talking about a neighbor who received a new fur coat from her son-in-law. Then suddenly she would start a conversation about how good it was when the young help the elders. Here Olga Petrovna from the third floor brags. Her son gives her 10,000 every month for food, for medicine. And am I worse? I also raised my son, gave him an education, brought him up in society. After such visits, Maxim became thoughtful, silent. Tatiana felt that something was wrong, but did not attach much importance to it. There was a lot of work, projects were burning, customers demanded the impossible. The first alarm bell rang 6 months after the wedding. Zinaida Romanovna came to visit not on Sunday, but on Wednesday evening. She looked upset, her eyes were red. "Maxim, son, I need to talk to you alone." They locked themselves in the bedroom for half an hour. Tatiana heard muffled voices, her mother-in-law sobbing. When they came out, Maxim had a strange expression on his face. Guilty and irritated at the same time. Quote, "What happened?" Tatiana asked. "Yes, mom's problems, I'll tell you later." Quote, but he was in no hurry to tell, but he started asking strange questions. "Tanya, how much do you get per month from the second apartment?" 25,000. "Why? I'm just curious. What are your plans for it? Are you going to rent it all out or are you thinking of selling it?" "I don't know yet. The income is stable, why sell it? Maybe in 10 years, when we're saving at home." Maxim nodded, but something in his gaze changed, as if he was calculating something in his mind, counting. A week later, Zinaida Romanovna appeared on the threshold again, this time with a large bag and red eyes. "Maxim is home, I really need to talk to him. We have a family problem." It turned out at dinner that Oksana, Maxim's sister, had a broken marriage. Her husband left her for his mistress, leaving her with 3 children in a rented one-room apartment. He refused to pay child support. It's hard to find a job, the youngest child is only 2 years old. Can you imagine what's going on? Zinaida Romanovna sobbed. 3 children in one room. Kasyusha is sleeping on a folding bed in the kitchen, and this bastard is chilling out with a young woman somewhere. The court will, of course, award alimony, but when will that be? And should the children go hungry? Tatiana sincerely sympathized. She knew Oksana superficially. They met a couple of times at family celebrations. A woman of about 30 worked as a saleswoman in a store, earned pennies. She really had no luck with her husband. "Maybe we can help with something?" Tatiana suggested. "Food, clothes for the children or money for the first time?" Zinaida Romanovna perked up. "You think, otherwise I don't know what to do. My pension is what you know. Maxim gets a salary, but he also has a family now. Expenses. Of course, we'll help. How much do you need for the first time?" "Yes, 15,000 would be enough for food, for utilities. And then we'll see." Tatiana immediately transferred the money. Maxim was touched by her willingness to help the family. Zinaida Romanovna even thanked her somehow warmer than usual. But after 2 weeks, the story repeated itself. Oksana urgently needed money for kindergarten, then for medicine, then for a school uniform for her eldest son. Each time the amounts were different. Sometimes 10,000, sometimes 5, sometimes 20. Tatiana helped without thinking. She had money, she felt sorry for the children. But gradually she began to notice that the requests were becoming more and more insistent, and gratitude is becoming more and more formal. Tanya, Mom says Oksana needs money again, Maxim said, not looking up from his phone. For winter clothes for the kids. How much? 25,000. That's almost your monthly salary. Well, yes, but you have other things too. This is my family, my sister, my nephews. Quote. New notes appeared in Maxim's voice. Resentment, reproach, as if Tatiana was obliged to help his relatives simply by virtue of her marriage. At this time, Zenita Romanovna carefully but persistently began a new line of conversation. In the kitchen, when Maxim went out for a smoke, she confidentially said to her daughter-in-law, "You know, Tatiana, I'm wondering if we're really going to beg for money all the time? It's somehow humiliating. Look, your apartment is empty, you take money from it every month, and Oksana's children are hanging around in the corners." Quote. What do you mean, Zenita Romanovna? Yes, I think so out loud. After all, a family should help each other. Not just with money, but with real help. Tatiana ignored these words then, but the seeds were sown, and Zenita Romanovna patiently, day after day, watered them with her hints, reproaches and tears. Zenita Romanovna was an experienced manipulator, although she would never call herself that. She believed that she simply cared about her family, about justice. 30 years of working with people, first at the plant, then in the board of directors, taught her to feel human weaknesses and push the right buttons. After that conversation in the kitchen with Tatiana, she understood, you can't take the fortress with a direct attack. The daughter-in-law is too independent, too self-confident, but she has a weak spot, Maxim. And through her son, she can get to the coveted square meters. It began, Zenita Romanovna from the small. She called Maxim every morning on the way to work. Son, good morning. How are you? How is Tatiana? The voice is caring, motherly. Listen, Oksana called yesterday evening, crying. The landlady wants to evict us, says it's too noisy with the kids. Where will they go? I have no idea. At first, Maxim only sighed. Mom, what can I do? We'll give you as much money as we can. I'm not talking about money, son, although, a pause, a sigh. I'm wondering, is it really going to be like this all my life? Your sister is wandering around with the kids in strange corners, and you and Tatiana have an extra apartment just sitting idle, with strangers living in it. Mom, this is Tatiana's apartment. She bought it before the wedding. And now you're a family. What does it mean? Family, son, is when everything is shared, when you stand up for each other like a mountain. After such conversations, Maxim would come home thoughtful. Tatiana would notice, but she would attribute it to fatigue. His workload increased. The company won a big tender. He had to design almost until night. Zenita Romanovna took the blows systematically. On Monday, a call about Oksana. On Tuesday, she came to visit with a cake and stories about how the neighbors were helping their relatives with housing. On Wednesday, another call, this time with complaints about her health. Maxim, my heart seized up at night. I thought, that's it, the end. And do you know what I thought? That I won't see my nephews grow up in normal conditions. Kasyusha will go to school next year. And where, to what area will they be resettled if the landlady kicks them out? Mom, don't get worked up. They'll find something. Of course they will. Some basement or a room in a communal apartment with alcoholics. It's not the children's fault that their father is a scumbag. Maxim began to change after about a month of such treatment. Tatiana noticed that her husband had become irritable, absent-minded, and in the evenings he would smoke for a long time on the balcony, staring at one point. He answered her questions in monosyllables. Maxim, what's wrong with you? Problems at work? Quote. No, everything's fine. Then what? I feel like you've been completely in yourself lately. I just think a lot about life, about family. What kind of family? About ours, about mom, about Oksana, about whether we're living right. Tatiana became wary. What does right mean? It seems like we're not bothering anyone, not offending anyone. It depends on how you interpret it. We're not offending anyone. New intonations sounded in her husband's voice, reproach, discontent. Tatiana tried to find out the details, but Maxim withdrew. Meanwhile, Zinaida Romanovna was moving on to the second phase of the operation. Now she attacked not only with morning calls, but also with evening visits. She came when Tatiana was at home and acted out heartbreaking scenes in front of her. Maxim, son, I don't know how to explain to Oksana that we can't help. Yesterday, the youngest got sick, temperature is almost 40, and there is no money for a doctor. Everything went on rent. Kasiusha asks, Grandma, why can't we live normally, like other children? What to answer her? And then, as if by chance, she added, it's good for those who have an extra living space in abundance. They rent to strangers, get money, and their own blood suffers. After such visits, Maxim became gloomy and aggressive, began asking Tatiana strange questions. Have you ever thought that the way we live is wrong? In what sense is it wrong? In the sense that we have everything, but our relatives have nothing. Maxim, we help Oksana with money. Every month we transfer 20–30,000 in money, the husband snorted. And what's the point? It still goes to rent. It's a vicious circle. And what are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything, I'm just thinking. Quote. But he wasn't thinking on his own. Every day Zinaida Romanovna threw him new portions of thoughts. She would bring a newspaper article about how important it is to help large families, or she would tell him about a TV show where they discussed housing problems. Maxim, did you see the story on TV yesterday about a family with 4 children who live in a one-room apartment? And you know what the worst thing is? My father has a brother who has 2 apartments. But he refuses to help, everyone speaks for themselves. What kind of selfishness is that, really? Yes, Mom, selfishness. That's what I'm saying, a family should be one whole. If one has something extra, and the other doesn't have the necessary, it's wrong. It's not Christian. Maxim nodded, absorbed every word, and at home he began to look at Tatiana with different eyes. She noticed these looks, evaluating, almost hostile. After 2 months of such treatment, open conflicts began in the house. Maxim began to find fault with little things. Why is dinner not ready? Why is the apartment not clean? Why is so much money spent on food? We spend 50,000 on food every month, he was indignant, pointing to the receipt from the supermarket. And Oksana and the children live on 20,000 the whole month. Maxim, we buy quality products, and then we have money. Why should we deny ourselves? There is money, we have it, and others do not. And it doesn't matter that the children do not have enough to eat. What children do not have enough to eat? We help Oksana. Crumbs. We give her crumbs, and we ourselves live like kings. Tatiana did not understand where her husband got such anger from. He used to be proud of her success, was happy about their financial stability, and now he seemed to consider wealth a sin. Zinaida Romanovna felt that things were moving in the right direction. Her son had become an ally. All that was left was to finish off the fortress with a final assault. She began the third phase. Direct attacks on Tatiana. Tatiana, my dear, I need to have a heart-to-heart talk with you, like a woman to a woman. They were sitting in the kitchen. Maxim went to the store. Zinaida Romanovna sipped her tea, choosing her words. You see, I can see that Maxim is worried. He's suffering. He's a good boy, conscientious. He can't live peacefully when his family suffers. Zinaida Romanovna, we help as much as we can. With money, yes, but that's not a solution to the problem. Oksana is on edge every month. Will there be enough for the rent? Will they kick her out? The children feel this instability, they're nervous. What do you suggest? I'm not suggesting anything. It's none of my business. But I'm thinking, you have an apartment, practically empty. Only strangers live in it. This apartment is rented out, it brings in income. We save up a house with this money. A house? Zinaida Romanovna drawled. And what about the children, can they wait? By the time you build a house, they will end up in an orphanage. A single mother, 3 children, a rented apartment, this is a direct path to deprivation of parental rights. Tatiana went cold. What are you saying? What orphanage? What's surprising about that? Social services are strict now, they will see that the children are living in inappropriate conditions and take them away. And then try to prove that you are a good mother. But this is nonsense. Oksana has a job, the children are dressed and fed. Fed, the mother-in-law chuckled. Yesterday my son told me that Kasyusha had lost a lot of weight. Stress and worries, poor nutrition, and the youngest is generally lagging behind in his development. There is no room to play normally. Every word hit the mark. Tatiana imagined her 3-year-old nephew in a government-run home and felt guilty. Maybe she really should think about more serious help? I'm not saying. Give her the apartment, Zinaida Romanovna continued in a soft voice. But maybe she should think. Family is more important than money, and once you build a house, your house will not go anywhere. That same evening, Maxim spoke directly for the first time. Tanya, my mother told me about a conversation with you. What conversation? About the apartment. About Oksana. So what? Because it's time to decide something radical. How long can we drag it out? Maxim, this is my apartment. I bought it with my own money before our marriage. Before marriage? Her husband exploded. And now what? We are strangers. My family is not your family. What does this have to do with it? The apartment brings in income. We are saving up for a house. We will save up for a house. And my nephews will be wandering around the garbage dumps in the meantime. You have excellent priorities. In his voice there was undisguised aggression. For the first time, Tatiana saw her husband so angry, unfair, as if he had been replaced. And of course, it was Zinaida Romanovna who had replaced him. 3 months of methodical work had yielded results. Maxim no longer doubted that his wife was obliged to give the apartment to her sister. His mother convinced him that this was the only way to solve the problem, that this is how a real family should act. Mom, what if Tatiana refuses? He asked during his next visit. She won't refuse. She's a smart girl, she understands what's what. She just needs time to get used to the idea. But what if she refuses? Quote. Zinaida Romanovna shrugged. So, she will show her true face. Then you decide for yourself what kind of wife you need, greedy or kind. Maxim Kival. In his head, maternal logic lined up in a clear system of coordinates. A good wife should sacrifice for the sake of her husband's family. A bad one thinks only about money. Tatiana was still hesitating between good and evil, but she had to make an unambiguous choice. Meanwhile, Tatiana felt her world collapsing. The husband she loved was turning into a stranger. Every conversation ended in a scandal. Every day brought new reproaches and claims. The worst thing was that she began to doubt herself. Maybe she really was selfish. Maybe she should think not only about her own interests. But when she imagined giving away the apartment, everything inside her shrank in protest. This was her fortress, her independence, the result of many years of work. I can't just give away the property, she tried to explain to Maxim. This is a serious decision. We need to think it all over, work out the legal aspects. Think it over? The husband shouted. How much longer can we think it over? The children are suffering, and you are looking for legal points. Quote. Tatiana understood that things would only get worse. Maxim had finally fallen under his mother's influence and no longer heard the arguments of reason. Every day brought new ultimatums, new scenes, new reproaches. And Zinaida Romanovna was preparing for the final blow. She felt that her daughter-in-law was on the verge of a breakdown. There was very little time left, but a reason was needed for a decisive attack, one that would make Maxim finally lose his temper and force his wife to give in. And the reason soon presented itself. November turned out to be gray and chilly. Tatiana returned from work tired. The project was due by the end of the month. She had to stay late. At home, a cold apartment, unwashed dishes and a sullen husband awaited her, who for a month had been talking to her exclusively through must, should, and it's time already. That evening she decided to cook borscht. Maxim loved it. Maybe he would warm up to her a little. The meat was already cooking hour. The beets were stewing over low heat. Tatiana was chopping cabbage, thinking about how their life had changed. 6 months ago, they cooked together, laughed, made plans, and now every day was like walking through a minefield. Maxim was sitting in the living room, watching TV, or rather, pretending to watch it. In reality, he was scrolling through his phone, frowning, typing something in a messenger, and probably texting his mother. Zinaida Romanovna was now calling him several times a day, each time with new terrible news about Oksana and the children. "Max, dinner will be ready soon," Tatiana shouted from the kitchen. "Uh-huh," he muttered in response. The phone in his hands vibrated. Maxim answered, but spoke quietly, almost in a whisper. Tatiana strained her ears. There was something alarming in her husband's intonation. Quote, "Yes, Mom, I understand. What do you mean they're kicking us out? When? And where can I get that kind of money? Yes, I understand that we need to decide." Tatiana felt her heart sink. Something had happened again. And again, this something would be her fault, her selfishness, her cruelty. Maxim ended the conversation and went into the kitchen. His face was as if he had learned of the death of a loved one. Quote, "What happened?" Tatiana asked cautiously, stirring the borscht. "Oksana is being kicked out. The landlady said to vacate the apartment by the end of the week." "Why?" "We transfer money on time. It's not about money. The neighbors complain about the noise from the children. The landlady is afraid of problems with the management company." Tatiana sighed. "The situation is unpleasant, but not critical. But she will find another apartment. There are many options in our area." "Another apartment," Maxim exploded. "Do you know how much a deposit and prepayment cost these days? Where can she get 100,000 right away? We will help, as always. We will help. And in 6 months it will be the same story again. And in a year too. You don't understand, it's a vicious circle. How much longer can we patch up the holes? And what are you suggesting?" Maxim stopped and looked at her intently. "Do you know what I'm suggesting? We've discussed this 100 times already. Maxim, I'm not ready to give up the apartment. It's too serious a decision. I'm not ready." My husband's voice became louder. "And when will you be ready?" "When the children are in an orphanage, take away." "What orphanage? Stop dramatizing." "Dramatizing? A single mother without permanent housing is a direct path to deprivation of parental rights. Is that what you want?" Tatiana felt a familiar sense of guilt. Every time the conversation turned to children, she began to doubt herself. Maybe she really should sacrifice the apartment for the sake of the children? "Maxim, let's discuss it calmly. Maybe there are other options." "There are no other options," her husband barked. "There is one way out: to give the apartment to her sister. But you are too greedy to understand this." "I am not greedy. I just do not want to make hasty decisions." "Hasty? We have been discussing this for months. How much more time do you need?" The argument was gaining momentum. Maxim was becoming more and more aggressive. Tatiana was becoming more and more confused. She tried to explain her position, but her husband did not listen. He repeated the same arguments, which he clearly learned by heart from his mother. "A real family should help each other," he shouted. "Do you only think about money? That's not true. We help Oksana all the time. Crumbs. We give her crumbs, but we live like kings. We live on our own earned money. On your earned money. And what, am I not a family member, my relatives? And not your relatives? Tatiana felt herself boiling inside. The injustice of the situation was getting on her nerves. She worked, earned money, bought real estate, and now she has to give it away simply because her mother-in-law decided so. Maxim, this apartment is mine. I bought it before the marriage with my own money. Legally, you have no rights to it. Legally. The husband's voice broke into a scream. So, for you, legal rights are more important than family. It is important for me not to make decisions under pressure. Under pressure, children end up on the street, and you talk about pressure. What children on the street? We will find Oksana another apartment. With what money? My salary is 30,000, she has 15. Where can I get collateral? I will give money for bail, as always. And what in 6 months? Will you give it again? And in a year? And when are we going to build the house? Tatiana felt that the conversation was going in circles. Maxim did not hear her arguments, did not want to look for compromises. He demanded only one thing, complete capitulation. Maxim, let's talk calmly tomorrow. Now we are both emotional. Tomorrow? Again tomorrow? And what today? Let the children sleep under the bridge. They are not being kicked out today. There is time until the end of the week. There is time. Her husband's voice became completely angry. It is easy for you to talk, there is time. You have 2 apartments. Aren't you afraid? What does my apartments have to do with it? Considering that you can afford the luxury of choice, and the children cannot. Tatiana felt that her patience was running out. Months of constant pressure, reproaches, accusations of selfishness. All this had accumulated and was ready to spill out. Maxim, stop yelling. Let's discuss the problem like adults. Like adults, he barked. Husband. In an adult way. This is when the family helps the family, and not when the wife hides behind legal formalities. I'm not hiding. I just don't want to give up the apartment. You don't want to, that's the whole truth. You don't care about my nephews. That's not true. True. You only think about yourself, about your precious square meters. I think about our future, about the house we wanted to build. What house? What future? While we're building a house, the children will end up in Grandpa's home. Stop it, no one will end up anywhere. They will end up there. Mom has already called a lawyer. He said that a single mother without permanent housing is at risk. Tatiana stopped. Quote, that means Zinaida Romanovna has already gotten lawyers involved. The pressure is increasing, the stakes are rising. What lawyer? She asked tiredly. Family. Mom consulted. He said, if the guardianship authorities find out that the family is constantly moving, there is no stable housing, questions may arise for the parent. And what did Mom suggest? And you guess for yourself. There is a way out of this situation, but you do not want to see it. Maxim, I am explaining for the last time. The apartment is mine, I am not ready to give it up. I am not ready. Maxim grabbed a pot of borscht from the table. And you know what? Enough. I am tired of your not ready. Tatiana saw rage in his eyes. She had never seen such a look in him. Angry, hateful. When my mother told you to give your second apartment to my sister with 3 children, you should have answered, yes, he yelled and threw the pot at Tatiana. Time slowed down. Tatiana saw how hot metal was flying at her, how red borscht was splashed, how drops of soup flew around the whole kitchen. Instinctively she dodged. The saucepan crashed against the wall behind her. Red liquid splashed across the white tiles, the furniture, the floor. Hot splashes hit Tatiana's hand, burning her skin. There were drops on her face too, hot, smelling of meat and vegetables. There was silence for a few seconds. Maxim looked at his wife with an expression of fear and satisfaction at the same time. Tatiana silently wiped the splashes from her face, looked at the devastation in the kitchen, and at that moment something in her finally broke. Not her heart. Her heart broke gradually, over months. Her illusions about her husband, about her family, about the fact that love can overcome everything broke. A man who throws a hot saucepan at his wife, demanding that she give her property to his relatives, is not a husband, he is a stranger, an enemy. Tatiana wiped the last drops of borscht from her face and smiled coldly. Okay, darling, tomorrow I'll start drawing up the paperwork. Maxim was taken aback. He expected tears, hysteria, a scandal, but received calm consent. Did he finally get through to her conscience? Really? He asked hopefully. Really, tomorrow I'm going to see a lawyer. Tatiana, you can't imagine how happy I am. Mom will be delighted. Yes, Mom will be pleased. Maxim did not catch the icy notes in his wife's voice. He was too intoxicated with victory. Finally, he was able to put her in her place. Finally, she understood that family is more important than money. I'll call my mom now and tell her, he said happily and went into the room to get the phone. And Tatiana was left standing in the kitchen, covered in borscht. The red stains on the walls looked like blood, and in a sense it was blood. The blood of their marriage, their love, their common future. The next morning, Tatiana really did go to a lawyer, but not the one Zinaida Romanovna had recommended, her friend Dmitry Anatolievich Sokolov, who had helped her formalize the purchase of apartments. Good afternoon, Tatiana Sergeevna. What brought you to me? Dmitry Anatolievich, I need to urgently sell an apartment. Which one of the two? The one that is rented out. A one-room apartment in the center. I may ask the reason. You are going to keep it for a long time as an investment. Tatiana briefly explained the situation. The lawyer listened attentively, nodding occasionally. I see. What are the deadlines? As quickly as possible. How much can I realistically sell for? It is difficult to find a buyer in 3 days, but maybe. We'll have to knock 10 to 15% off the price. Knock it off. Speed is important to me. Okay. Let's start the paperwork. Let's start. Dmitry Anatolievich was a professional in his field. In 2 days he found a buyer, a young family who had been looking for an apartment in that area for a long time. On the 3rd day they signed the purchase and sale agreement. The money arrived in Tatiana's account. Rub 3,800,000. Not a bad amount for a new life. Maxim was elated these days, calling Oksana, telling her that all the problems would soon be solved, calling realtors, looking for suitable apartment options for his sister. Zinaida Romanovna did not hide her triumph. She had won the war against her arrogant daughter-in-law. When Maxim found out the truth, his screams were actually heard by the neighbors on the floor above, and on the floor below too. Quote, "What have you done?" he yelled, waving the purchase and sale agreement. "Have you sold the apartment?" "I sold it, just like you asked." "I didn't ask to sell, I asked to give it to my sister. And I decided to sell. It was my apartment. I had the right to sell it." "What right? You deceived me." "I fulfilled your demand. You said to draw up the documents." "I did." Maxim paced around the apartment like an animal in a cage. It was already dark outside. The light from the chandelier fell on his distorted face. "Did you plan all this on purpose?" "I didn't plan anything. I just finally realized what a selfish person I am and decided to rid you of this problem. Give the money back, buy another apartment." "No, how come?" "No way. The money is spent." "What was it spent on?" "On a new life." At that moment the doorbell rang. Maxim rushed to open it. Zinaida Romanovna stood on the threshold, her face red with anger. Quote, "Where is this deceiver?" she screamed, bursting into the hallway. "I'm here, Zinaida Romanovna, what have you done, you snake in the grass, deceived gullible people?" "I sold my property. By law, I had the right to do so." "What property?" "You're married. Everything should be shared. The apartment was purchased before the marriage. According to the family code, it is not considered jointly acquired property. Zinaida Romanovna's mouth dropped open. She didn't expect her daughter-in-law to know the legal intricacies. Quote, "A fraud, a thief," the mother-in-law screamed. "I deceived the family. I didn't deceive anyone. Maxim asked me to draw up documents for the apartment. I drew up documents for the sale. Did you know what we meant? I knew that you wanted to get my apartment for free, but I decided that selling it was a more honest option." The scandal continued until midnight. The mother and son shouted, threatened, demanded that they return the money. Tatiana answered calmly, referring to the laws and her rights. By the morning, their voices had died, but Tatiana's decision did not change one iota. Quote, "Tomorrow I'm filing for divorce," she said when Zinaida Romanovna finally left. "You don't dare?" "I dare. And you know what, Maxim? I have a recording of yesterday's conversation in the kitchen. The entire scene with the saucepan was recorded on a phone." Maxim turned pale. "What recording?" "Domestic violence. Attempted bodily harm. The court will take this into account when dividing the property." "Did you record this on purpose?" "No, the phone was on the table. The recording turned on by accident, but it turned out to be very telling." Maxim realized that he had lost once and for all. A week later, Tatiana filed for divorce in the district court. Dmitry Anatolievich took it upon himself to represent her interests. Over the years of cooperation, they became not just a lawyer and a client, but trusted each other. "The audio recording is a very strong trump card," he said after listening to the file from Tatiana's phone. "The courts now take domestic violence seriously, plus coercion to alienate property." This is also an article. Dmitry Anatolievich, I do not want revenge, I just want justice. Justice will be. According to the law, the apartment in which you live is subject to division in half. It was purchased during the marriage. But given the circumstances of the case, you can claim a larger share. And what about Maxim? He has the right to half of the apartment where you now live. This is about 155 million. If you're lucky, less. Maxim tried to find a lawyer, but good specialists were expensive, and the engineer's salary did not allow such expenses. In the end, he turned to a lawyer he knew, Zinaida Romanovna, a semi-literate pensioner who had once worked in the plant's legal department. "Don't worry, son," his mother reassured him. "Justice will prevail. The court will see how greedy she is and will punish her." Quote, Zinaida Romanovna was confident of victory. In her worldview, wives were obliged to obey their husbands and their families, and the courts were obliged to protect traditional values. The first hearing was scheduled for December. Tatiana came with Dmitry Anatolievich, Maxim with Uncle Tolia, the factory lawyer. Zinaida Romanovna sat in the public hall, her lips pressed into a thin line. The judge, a woman of about 50, carefully studied the case materials. The application for divorce between Kremneva Tatiana Sergeevna and Kremnev Maxim Olegovich is being considered. The plaintiff insists on divorce and division of property. The defendant objects to the divorce and challenges the division. Please state the plaintiff's position. Dmitry Anatolievich stood up. Your Honor, the marriage between the parties has effectively ended. The defendant used psychological and physical violence against the plaintiff, forced him to alienate premarital property in favor of third parties. As evidence, I present an audio recording of the conflict, during which the defendant threw a pot of hot food at the plaintiff. The recording was turned on. Every word could be heard in the courtroom. Maxim's screams, his demands to give up the apartment, the sound of the pot hitting the wall. The judge listened attentively, sometimes raising her eyebrows. Quote, "Does the defendant acknowledge the authenticity of the recording?" she asked. Uncle Tolia stood up. Quote, Your Honor, this was a family conflict. My client was worried about the fate of his nephews. Emotions got the upper hand. Emotions do not justify violence, the judge dryly noted. The defendant's position regarding the division of property. We demand that the sale of the apartment by the plaintiff be declared invalid. She acted fraudulently, misled her husband. On what grounds? She promised to transfer the apartment to her husband's relatives, but instead sold it. The wife had the right to dispose of premarital property at her own discretion. There are no other arguments. Uncle Tolia was confused. Zinaida Romanovna hissed advice to him from the back row, but he did not know what to say. The trial lasted 2 months. During this time, the circumstances of the lives of all participants in the drama changed dramatically. Maxim, left in his wife's apartment without her financial support, quickly felt the difference between life with a successful wife and life on one salary. Utility bills ate up a third of his income. There was little left for food. He had to forget about restaurants, cinema, quality clothes. Zinaida Romanovna moved in with her son. Her pension was not enough for a separate life after the help from her daughter-in-law stopped. Mother and son huddled in a 2-room apartment, constantly arguing about money and household problems. He brought it to good. The mother-in-law nagged every day. He lost such a wife. Apartments, a good salary, help for the family, everything was there. And what did you do? He brought us to divorce. Mom, you were the one who talked me into it, Maxim snapped. I wanted the best. I thought she was a decent person, she valued her family. But she turned out to be smart, and you're a fool, you missed out on such wealth. Oksana and the children were still wandering around rented apartments. Her brother could no longer help even with a symbolic amount. He himself was barely making ends meet. Moreover, now Zinaida Romanovna was living off him, increasing her expenses. Maxim, I don't have enough to pay for housing, my sister complained on the phone. Oksana, I have problems of my own. I'm getting divorced, the court, a lawyer costs money. And help from Tatiana. What help? She sold the apartment and filed for divorce. How did she sell it? And what should I do with the children? I don't know, Oksana, I don't know. Oksana realized that she could no longer count on anyone. She got a second job, cleaned offices at night, slept 4 hours a day. The children hardly saw their mother. The younger one started getting sick from lack of attention, the middle one, fighting at school. Meanwhile, Tatiana was setting up a new life, renting an apartment in another area, changing jobs for a higher-paying position in an international company, signing up for English courses, going to the gym, and starting to read books that she hadn't had time for before. How are things with the divorce? Dmitry Anatolievich asked during a break between meetings. Normal. I want to close this stage as soon as possible. I understand. By the way, do you have any plans for the future on a personal level? Tatiana looked at him carefully. Dmitry Anatolievich was a man of about 40, divorced with an adult daughter, smart, successful, with a sense of humor. It's too early to think about it. Take your time, but when you're ready, I'll be happy to invite you to dinner as friends. Of course. Tatiana smiled. After months of living with an aggressive, demanding husband, it was nice to communicate with a man who treated her with respect. The final hearing took place in February. The judge announced the decision. The marriage between Kremniva TS and Kremnivo Mo is dissolved. The 2-room apartment at the address is to be divided proportionally. The plaintiff gets 70%, the defendant gets 30%. The fact of domestic violence and coercion to alienate property is taken into account. Maxim turned pale. You are a little over $1 million. For that kind of money in Moscow you can only buy a share in a communal apartment. Quote, Your Honor, this is unfair, Uncle Tolia jumped up. The decision was made taking into account all the circumstances of the case. The hearing is over. Quote, Zinaida Romanovna ran out of the courtroom in tears. Her plan had failed completely. Instead of a free apartment for Oksana, the family received poverty and shame. A month later, Tatiana bought out her ex-husband's share for $1,200,000. This was more profitable than selling the apartment and dividing the money. Maxim agreed immediately. The money was needed urgently. He used this amount to buy a 1-room apartment in a residential area. Zinaida Romanovna moved in with him. Her pension was still not enough for a separate life. Mother and son lived in cramped conditions, constantly arguing. "This is what they brought us to," Zinaida Romanovna lamented every evening. "We lived like people, and now we are huddled in a kennel." "Enough," Maxim exploded. "I came up with it all myself, and now I have to clean up the mess myself. I tried for the family, I wanted to help the children, I helped. Oksana is now left without any help at all. And I live in poverty." By the age of 40, Maxim had truly turned into an embittered loser. He worked in the same position, received the same salary, but his standard of living had fallen dramatically. Colleagues knew about his divorce, sympathized, but few wanted to communicate with a constantly dissatisfied man. His personal life was not working out. Women his age were looking for wealthy partners, and he could only offer a one-room apartment with his mother and a modest salary. His story of divorce and domestic violence scared younger people. Zinaida Romanovna had aged 10 years in a year. Her gray hair had thinned, her back had become bent, and her face had become covered with deep wrinkles. Instead of triumph over her rich daughter-in-law, she had received poverty and loneliness. Oksana and her children were unable to solve their housing problem. Rented apartments replaced one another. The children got used to living out of suitcases. The eldest son began to skip school. The middle one got into bad company. The youngest was lagging behind his peers in development. And Tatiana, 6 months after the divorce, actually married Dmitry Anatolievich. They got to know each other better while she was formalizing her new business. She opened an IT consulting firm with the money from the sale of her apartment. "Are you sure you're ready for a new marriage?" the groom asked before the wedding. "I am ready, but now I know the value of trust and I know that I need to protect my boundaries. I would never demand that you give up your property to my relatives. And if I did, I would be refused." And fair enough. The wedding was held in a small circle, about 20 people in a good restaurant. Tatiana was in an elegant white dress, Dmitry was there in an expensive suit. They flew to Italy for their honeymoon. With the money from the sale of their first apartment and the income from their business, they bought a house in a village near Moscow. Not a huge mansion, but a cozy cottage with a plot of land, a garage, a bathhouse, exactly the kind that Tatiana dreamed of with her first husband. Zinaida Romanovna sometimes saw her former daughter-in-law in a store or on the street. Tatiana looked happy and rejuvenated. Good cosmetic procedures, expensive clothes, a confident gait. There was often an elegant man nearby who treated her like a queen. "I saw your ex," Zinaida Romanovna told her son after such meetings. "So what? She's in bloom, walking around in a new fur coat. An expensive car. They say she's married again." "To whom?" "To the lawyer who testified against us in court. Rich, apparently. They bought a house outside the city." Maxim was silent. At such moments it dawned on him that he had lost not just a wife, he had lost a partner, an ally, a person who could have provided him with a decent life. Instead, he chose the side of his greedy mother and capricious sister. "We could have lived like that too," sighed Zinaida Romanovna. "If you hadn't flown at her with a saucepan then." "You were the one who talked me into it," Maxim exploded. "You said that a real wife should help her husband's family. She should. But she can't sell apartments out of spite. She turned out to have a character of steel. It's too late to reason now." "Too late," his mother agreed. But it was still a shame. So much money had passed him by. Maxim understood that his mother would never admit her guilt. For her, Tatiana will remain a greedy egoist who deceived an honest family. Zinaida Romanovna was not able to understand the simple truth. Demanding a person to give up his property is shameless and stupid. 3 years passed after the divorce. Maxim worked in the same position, lived in the same cramped apartment with his aging mother. Oksana and the children moved to another city, where housing was cheaper. Communication with her brother was almost broken, and Tatiana built a successful business, gave birth to a daughter, lived in love and prosperity with her husband, who valued her intelligence and independence. Sometimes she remembered her first marriage as a bad dream. Was she really ready to give up the apartment simply because her husband's greedy relatives decided so? It's good that everything ended this way, she thought, rocking her daughter before bed. It is better to know a person's true face right away than to spend your whole life on him. Maxim never understood that he once lost the most valuable thing in his life. He still considered himself the victim of a cunning woman, and not the culprit of his own misfortunes.